fod y mwg yn dod i'w ben. Mae o'n cylchredig at yn hael, ac yn carlan et fy mhen. O coffi du, y dyr o coffi du, coffi du, cos eisiau coffi du, coffi du, coffi du, coffi du, cos eisiau coffi du, Dwi'n eistedd wrth fy ngwaith, mae'r effaith yn lleihau. Yn bryd cael coffi arall, i gadw gysglyd fi ar bar. Yn hedio lawr i gegin gem, rhaid bod na goffi gen ai ffyr. O'n eich di goffi neu ddau arall, gym i weld diwadd y dyr. O coffi.
Coffee. Oh.
Coffee do, I did a coffee do, me a coffee do, cause we should coffee do, coffee do, did a coffee do, me a coffee do, cause we should coffee do, coffee do, whoa,
Well, ahora pueden cantar en galés. So, good morning, bore da, and croeso, welcome. Vamos a hacer esta sesión en una mezcla de 3 idiomas, ¿no es cierto, Clare?
Sí, bore da, Catrin. Bore
Bore
da,
da, Clare. Sut hwyl?
Da iawn.
Da iawn, ardderchog. So, croeso. Vamos a empezar hablando un poco de el país de Gales, un poco del idioma, y Claire y yo vamos a compartir pantalla. So, let's start. First of all, Wales. In English, we say Wales. In Spanish, we say Gales. In Welsh, we say Cymru. Cymru. The word is Cymru. The name is Cymru. Where is Wales? Well, it's in Great Britain, which is comprised of Wales, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. And here you see the Republic of Ireland. This is Wales from space, and you can see it's very green. It's very green and mountainous. The mountains aren't as high as the Andes. No son tan altos como la cordillera de los Andes, but they are very old. And here we are in relation to Europe. This is Wales in Europe, the world, and you can see the distance that the first Welsh settlers traveled from Liverpool to Puerto Madryn. And this is the journey that Claire and I take when we go home. Viajamos, no sé, Claire, cuántas veces hemos viajado de
sí.
Chubut a Reino
Cada
Unido.
2 años por ahí.
Hace mucho no vamos, hace
No.
mucho no vamos, hace mucho, ¿no? Sí, se siente mucho en este momento.
Y siente muy lejos, 11,000 kilómetros, 11,000 kilometers.
Yeah, it feels like a lot at the moment. Sometimes it doesn't, but at the moment, when we can't go, it feels like a lot. So, in Wales, we have symbols that represent us. Like in Argentina, you have the flag, while in Wales, we have our flag. We have the red dragon, which symbolizes Wales. and the green grass of home. And then we also have the flower of Wales, which is the daffodil, the narciso. We also have the leek, el puerro, que nos representa como país. Puede ser un poco extraño para ustedes, pero para nosotros es natural tener una verdura que nos representa. Clare knows that in Trevelyan 1 year, they invented a Welsh empanada. ¿No es cierto, Clare?
Sí, sí, riquísima. El fusión perfecto entre el puerro de Gales y la empanada de la Argentina.
Sí, puerro con queso. Es una combinación espectacular. Es re rico. Es re rico. Y además se cocina el puerro en manteca. Ayuda siempre mucha manteca. Okay. We also have the harp, as you see here. But this isn't an ordinary harp. It has 3 rows of strings. Es más parecida el arpa paraguaya, que las cuerdas afuera están en do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, y adentro tenemos las notas negras, digamos. And here we can see a picture of the daffodil, the harp, the dragon, the leek, and for many people, rugby represents Wales. Also sheep, castles, and the Welsh hat, and of course mountains. We have more castles per kilometer square than anywhere else in the world. ¿No es cierto, Claire?
Sí, ¿y saben por qué? Porque los galeses tienen un espíritu indomable. Entonces, por eso, los conquistadores de Inglaterra, de Francia, tuvieron que construir castillos para mantener la paz ahí.
Y mantenernos abajo, Claire.
Sí.
Well, tourism is very important in Wales. And these are flyers for tourism in Wales. And you can see a little. The mountains of Canolbarth significa mid-Wales. And West Wales, we have the coast. South Wales, we have the capital city, Cardiff. And North Wales is just, North Wales. So what I wanted to share with you first is a little bit about the geography. So Wales is a small country, about 280 kilometers from the south to the north. We have mountains, and as you can see, we have many, many rivers. Here we can see not only the rivers, but we can see in green the national parks, and we can see the motorway. So we have very important or very important autopistas que llegan de Inglaterra, van al oeste, acá en el sur y acá en el norte. Porque acá en Pembroke y acá en Holyhead hay ferries que van a Irlanda. Pero viajar del sur al norte, del norte al sur, es re difícil. 300, ni son 300 kilómetros, pero no se puede hacerlo en menos que 5 horas. And as you can see, it rains in Wales. It rains approximately 3,000 millimeters on the high ground. Pero más cerca a la frontera con Inglaterra, solo 1,000 milímetros por año, ¿no? Acá tenemos unas fotos espectaculares de la costa.
Catrin, para, tengo una nostalgia terrible.
Yo también. Yeah. 2,205 kilometers of coastline. Eso es solo la costa. Y hay un camino, no sé si lo hiciste, Claire, yo nunca hice uno.
Yo tampoco, tenemos que ir.
Sí, hay un caminito de la costa. Lo pueden hacer. Lo podemos hacer. Vamos.
2.000 kilómetros de costa.
Sí, de costa.
Es un
Caminando.
país. Sí,
No,
sí, sí.
caminando. Wow.
Sí, sí, sí.
Pero
Pero hay
se hace
gente
en
que lo
partes.
hace. Hay
Haces
gente que lo hace.
un fin de semana haces 25 kilómetros, otro fin de semana haces otro
Oh.
y no. Es raro que uno hace en un viaje.
Sí.
Sí.
Sí, pero yo leo una exalumna mía que está haciéndolo. Está haciéndolo en pandemia. Es algo un reto que ha dado o lo hace para juntar plata para una caridad. Sí, nostalgia, ¿no es cierto, Claire?
Sí. Viviendo entre él y más, porque imagínate, estoy muy lejos de la... no, y ya es peor. This is even more nostalgic because the top photograph is where Catrin and I went to university. That's our university.
Yeah, that's our university. And this is the building where we studied.
Looking out at the sea, not at the lecturer.
Yeah. I lived here for 1 year. I lived here for 1 year. It was wonderful to open my curtains every morning and see the sea. It was wonderful. And at the bottom here on the right, we see Cardiff Bay. So Cardiff Bay now is seeing a lot of, I don't know, economic growth. This is the old municipal building. La municipalidad de Cardiff. Tenemos dos nombres siempre para las ciudades. Tenemos el nombre galés y el nombre en inglés. Entonces, depende del mapa que miren, cambia el nombre. Here we have Caerdydd para Clare y yo, pero Cardiff para muchos. We see here the municipal building. This is the Senedd, el Parlamento galés. And this is the Millennium Centre, a cultural centre. This is a fishing town, a beautiful fishing town. In Welsh, it's called Dimbych y Pysgod. And in English, Claire?
Tenby.
Tenby. No tiene el sonido.
No es la poesía en inglés, ¿no?
Sí. Y acá quería mostrar la clima que ven es muy muchas nubes. This is the highest mountain in Wales, Snowdon. This is a traditional Welsh castle, but just the North Wales. And mid Wales and South Wales. You can see that it looks a little different. And of course, if we have mountains, then we have mountain farming. That is why we have so many sheep. And these are traditional black Welsh cattle. They're called Da Di Cymraeg. It's their name. ¿No es cierto, Claire?
Sí.
Yeah. And a lot of rain. Y mi marido siempre se queja. Catrin, tenés imágenes hermosas, pero nadie vive en Gales. No hay nadie en las fotos. Bueno, en realidad, we have a population of about 3 million people.
Yes, Catrin, I was going to say that Wales would fit 10 times into Chubut. El superficie entraría 10 veces en solamente la provincia de Chubut, pero tenemos 6 veces la población. We have 3 million people and Chubut has 500,000.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing I forgot to tell you is that because it's very rainy, we don't have a very high temperature. So the temperature in Wales is about, the annual mean temperature is 11 degrees Celsius. 11 grados es la temperatura anual. No es muy alto. And it does snow. Okay, history. People live in Wales and have lived in Wales since Neanderthal times. But we calculate that people have lived permanently in Wales for about 11,000 years. The Celts came here and they settled, the Celtic people. So the Welsh language is a Celtic language. And then came the Romans. This is Segontium in Caernarfon. This is a town in North Wales, and this would have been the Roman fort there. The Romans were there for 2 centuries, Clare?
Yeah.
And when they left, it opened Wales up to other conquerors. So then the Anglo-Saxons came, and then the Normans came. In the meantime, Wales wasn't, or Welsh wasn't only spoken in Wales, but also in the north of England and the south of Scotland. This is called Yr Hen Ogledd, the Old North. And we have poetry from here, from the 6th century, that Clare and I both studied at university. I studied it in school because we can understand it. No, Clare?
Wir a aeth gatraeth oedd
Oedd
ffraeth
ffraeth ei llu.
You see, we still remember it from all those
You
years
still
ago.
remember. Yeah. And so poetry was very important. So we have poetry from Wales in Welsh all during this period when the Anglo-Saxons were there and the Picts and the Celtic. This is Hywel Dda, who wrote his own laws that are still recognised in Wales. We have some pictures here of churches and castles from this period. We have the Welsh princes. And this is the church of Dewi Sant, who was a saint in Wales in the 6th century as well, I think. Unfortunately, the Norman conquest brought problems. And we have many famous Welsh princes and kings, but the last one was Llywelyn ein Lliw Olaf, Llywelyn the last, who died, was killed in Kilmeri in 1282 by the Normans. And that is when the Normans started building these castles. So this is Caerphilly Castle, Caernarfon Castle. They built many, many fortresses, as Clare said earlier, to keep everyone down, to keep the Welsh quiet. Just some photos now from Cardiff. This is Caerdydd. This is the castle from outside, the castle inside, and this is the old castle, the old fortress. Here we have about 1 million people living. Around Cardiff, about 1/3 of the population of Wales lives around Cardiff. And this is the Millennium Centre from the outside.
It might be interesting to say, you mentioned the Senedd. Are you going to talk about this now, Catrin?
Look, just more of Aberystwyth to make you cry.
Yes, yes, what a brilliant place to study. It's just like Trelew, don't you think?
No. Okay, one thing that we need to discuss the coal mines. Many people who came to Patagonia came from the South Wales coal mines, from Aberdâr, from Abercynon, from the Rhondda, and these are the kinds of houses they lived in. This is the kind of life they had, and the coal pits. And from North Wales, the people who came probably worked in the lachas. They worked in the llechi quarries. Minas de Lacha, no?
Mm-hmm.
And in 1997, we had, well, since the 70s, we've had Welsh road signs. So you can see the road signs in both Welsh and in English. You see here on the road, it says slow, despacio, and in Welsh it says araf. You can see here, this is a sign from Caernarfon. So you can see that the Welsh is first and the English comes second. But this is from another area of Wales.
It's from Wrexham, it's from my hometown.
No,
Yes.
but it's English first and Welsh second, because more of the population speak English as a first language, don't they?
Yes, exactly.
And we have this sign here from, oh, that's
Gaiman.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to show to everybody were the words at the Millennium Centre, Clare, because they're both in Welsh and in English. I wonder if anybody can read them and understand. Because if we read from left to right, creu gwir in these stones fel gwydyr, horizons or ffwrnais awen sing. It's very difficult because we have two languages, the Welsh and the English. But if you read the Welsh on the left and the English on the right, Claire, do you want to read them?
Creu gwir fel gwydyr o'r ffwrnais, which would be creating truth like glass from the furnace. And then in these stones, horizons sing, which is poetry in English as well.
Which is poetry in English. And it just represents how important both languages go together. And yes, this is the last thing I want to say for now, Claire, before I give you the screen. In 1997, we had a referendum and voted, the whole country voted for more powers. So we have datganoli, which is what's the word in English? Devolution.
Devolution.
Devolution. So more powers for Wales and less for London.
Okay. Ahora me toca a mí. Oh. Okay. So, as Catrin said, she's explained the geography, and each part of Britain has its own identity. People feel English, or they feel Welsh, or they feel Scottish, or they feel Irish. You never really meet lots of people who say, oh, I feel British, because British is four identities. And very often we confuse England with the United Kingdom. And no, there are four identities. And what makes an identity? It's the history, it's the culture, and it's the language for me, for us. Lots of people say Welsh is just like English, isn't it? Did you hear Catrin and me speaking? Bore da, Catrin, sut wyt ti? Ti'n iawn heddiw? Diolch yn fawr. Does that sound like English?
No.
I think not. Okay. Lots of people say everyone speaks English anyway. Why bother with a minority language? Because Welsh is a minority language. We are a minority who speak the language in our own country. We have 3 million people living in Wales and 750,000 speaking Welsh. So we are a minority. And then we have people saying, es un idioma muerto. It's a dead language. And obviously, Catrin and I speak it, so it's not dead, is it? We are still speaking it. So Welsh is not like English because el galés es mucho más viejo y tiene otra raíz. well, I'll show you a picture. Everyone speaks English. Why bother with a minority language? Well, for us, the language is culture, it's belonging, and it's our soul. Take away our language, you take away our soul. And it's a dead language? No, because we have 760,000 people speaking that language. Okay, this map is the tree of Indo-European languages. You know, centuries and centuries and centuries ago, the Indo-Europeans came across the continent into Europe, and these branches of language began to develop. And do you know where Welsh is? It's here. It's in this little branch here. So we belong to this European branch, which are the Celtic European languages. And then they go off into the Germanic ones and so on. You can find this on the internet if you want to study it more closely. But there we are. So Welsh is a very small Indo-European Celtic language. It arrived in Great Britain about 600 years before Christ. English didn't even exist at that point. There was no such thing as English. There were people speaking different Indo-European languages, but there was no English. There were the Brittonic languages, which were spoken in Wales, in Cornwall, and Brittany in France. Those then developed. So Welsh began to develop, and we have an Old Welsh, yr Hen Gymraeg, which existed from 9th century to the 12th. And we have poetry, as Catrin mentioned, written in those centuries. And it's a language that we can understand. With a bit of help, we can understand. Old English is totally incomprehensible. We can't understand it. It's another language, but Old Welsh, we can recognize. This developed into Cymraeg Canol, which is Middle Welsh. And this is where the Mabinogi come into the story. The Mabinogi are the most fantastic folk tales. And they were written down in the 12th century, which means that people were telling those stories much, much before. Si pueden, hay una versión de la Mabinogi en español que hizo Lucía Cordo Russo como parte de su doctorado. Vale la pena verlos. Es muy interesante. Son increíbles. And of course, modern Welsh brings us up to today. You live in Chubut, and maybe you say, well, the Welsh came here, what did they leave? Well, they left Chubut, they left the agricultural background, they left the towns, they left the buildings, and they left some words. Tref means pueblo. V at the end of a word is a very weak consonant. So it sometimes sounds like tre. And so we are speaking on behalf of the University of Trelew, the Pueblo de Lewis. Avon. Have you ever thought about Dol Avon? Dol is the curve in the river, the meadow, and Avon is Rio. Ysgol. It's not a million miles away from escuela, is it? So that's the Latin root in the language coming out. Pnawn da. Are we in the afternoon, yes? No. You might have heard older people saying that. Bore da, pnawn da. Melyn. I live in Tre Felyn, the town, the pueblo de Molino. Bara, maybe when you've had a Welsh tea, they've offered you bara menyn. We all know about the famous taste in the torta negra. And Porth Madryn, yes, Puerto Madryn. So those are words that are here, that are in Welsh, they're around us. Okay, we could talk for 10 weeks on the language. We could do an introduction to the linguistics, but let's go to something a bit lighter. People associate Wales and the Welsh with music. Well, you heard Catrin and me singing We sing at every opportunity. My students know not a class passes by without a song. We must have songs. And there is a saying which says, to be born Welsh is to be born privileged, not with a silver spoon in your mouth, but with music in your blood and poetry in your soul. No sé por vos, Catrin, pero para mí perdí un poco del poetry, pero la música sí, la música sigue. So what about looking at some people who've made Welsh music famous in the world? Okay, let's see if you recognize this one and can tell me what his name is.
We got to do this next song. This song is a must. We have to do it.
Yes!
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. It's not unusual to have fun with anyone. When I see you hanging about with anyone, it's not unusual to see me cry. I wanna die. It's not unusual to go out at any time. When I see you out and about, it's such a crime.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
If you should ever wanna be loved by anyone, it's not unusual, it happens every day. No matter what you say, you find it happens all the time. Love will never do what you wanna do. Why can't this crazy love be mine? It's not unusual to be mad with anyone. It's not unusual to be sad with anyone. But if I ever find that you changed at any time, it's not unusual to find that I'm in love with you. Whoa, 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 go, whoa, 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 whoa. All right, come on, baby. Tell me one more time. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. God bless you.
Well, spotted straight away, Tom Jones.
We gotta do this.
Tom Jones.
We gotta do this next.
There he
You
is.
like him. I think that
You really?
like.
Yes. Who doesn't like Tom Jones? He's 80 years old and he's just done a concert in Wales, a live concert like that. Loads of people, loads of music. And he came from the valleys of South Wales. Él es uno que
Forest in Pontypridd.
Treforest, diolch Catrin. I could remember. And he's made a huge success. Look at what he was like when he was young, but still, there's a So Tom Jones, we're very proud of Tom Jones. We love Tom Jones. Changing the atmosphere completely, Bryn Terfel. Bryn Terfel is an opera singer who has sung at the Scala Milan. He has sung at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And here in Buenos Aires in 2000, did you go, Catrin? Did you go to the concert?
Of course I went.
Ah, you're
2018.
so lucky.
Yes, of course I
2018.
went. It was fantastic.
I'm sure. I couldn't go, but listen, this is Bryn Terfel's voice. Let's just listen to a little bit of Bryn Terfel's voice. Oh.
I lie awake, alone as night is falling. I listen, and it's clear I hear you calling. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. I'll save you and protect you and hold you gently in my loving arms. A guardian angel keeping watch till morning. A guardian angel with undying love. I'm safe with you to guide me. I'll rest with you beside me. My guardian angel from above.
Okay, Catrin and I wanted to sing with that because that is such a famous song. Sorry, Catrin. It's a very emotional song, and he sings it beautifully. So that was Bryn Terfel. Okay,
It was written for him, actually.
Oh, was it? Oh, I didn't know that. In a different way, we have Catrin mentioned the harp, a Delin. And here is Catrin Finch, who is probably our most famous harpist. She was once Prince Charles's personal harpist. Tenemos esas cosas raras en Gran Bretaña, ¿no? Que tenemos un rey, un príncipe y eso, y ellos pueden tener un arpista, no sé, para tocar en la fiesta. So, Catrin Finch, but she came to Patagonia in 2015 and played with the BBC orchestra who came. But she also does fusion music. No solamente toca fantástico clásicamente, pero también hace esos proyectos. Entonces, acá tengo un poco de ella y a ver si reconocen la otra música. Se fue mi sonido, ¿no?
Sí.
Ah, bueno. Perdimos el parte más movidita. Después comparto el link porque es fantástico. Empiece el grupo que es Cimarrón, no sé si los escucharon alguna vez. Son de Colombia. Entonces, esa canción melódica galesa se transforme en una canción en joporro, ¿es? Joropo. Eso.
Joropo.
Okay, I can see that we're running out of time. So I mentioned the BBC Orchestra. We have a national orchestra of Wales. They came to South America. They came to Patagonia in 2015 and worked with lots of different groups. Trabajaron con grupos sociales, grupos de chicos con discapacidades, todo tipo de proyectos. Hicieron un concierto en Trelew que fue increíble. Y tengo que decir algo de folk music, porque tenemos folk music. Ese es un grupo joven. Vamos a ver si el sonido funciona. ¿Qué es eso?
Sim
Okay, tenemos que correr. So, music, lots of cerddoriaeth yn Gymraeg. We have different styles, different things, but it's in our blood. We also have literature, the poetry. We have magazines in Welsh. We have novels in Welsh. We have a weekly newspaper in Welsh. We have children's books in Welsh to help the little children learn the language of their fathers. And of course, we have poetry. And one of the things that has transferred to Chubut as well is the Eisteddfod. You've heard there's an Eisteddfod in Trelew, in Porthmadryn, in Trefelyn, in we have an Eisteddfod for the youth in Gaiman. And in Wales, the Eisteddfod is central to our culture because it celebrates music, poetry, dance, art, yes, which helps preserve the language. So here is an ex-college mate of Catrin and I, who is a very famous author and poet now. This is the Druids, the Gorsedd. And here is Gwion Hallam winning another prize for the poetry. And also the Eisteddfod is not just boring culture. It's also for concerts and live music, and it's very live. This is a little bit of the history. It's been around since 1176. The first Eisteddfod was held in 1176. It lost its way a little, and in 1861, Catrin.
In 540, with Maelgwn Gwynedd, there is a story that he held a competition between musicians and bards. So it was the musicians had to compete against the bards, but to get to the competition, they had to swim a river. So the musicians were carrying their harps on their backs and carrying their violins, or what were early versions of violins, and their instruments just se estropearon cruzando el río, whereas the bards got there and won the competition. So they didn't use the word Eisteddfod, but from the year 540, we do have competitions. Poetry and musical competitions in Welsh.
Diolch yn fawr. Okay, so the main prizes in the Eisteddfod are a chair and a crown. Una sillon y una corona. One is for a type of poetry, the cadair, the sillon, is for poetry in a very strict rhythm, meter format, which I can't write, but it's very musical. When you hear it, for example, y gwir aeth gatraeth oedd fraeth ei lli, that is an example of this kind of meter. And the crown is for a more free type of poetry, yes, more free verse. So those are the two main prizes. And we have a lot to say to thank you to this mad man. Es un loco. Fue un loco. Iolo Morgannwg. He was a poet, he was a philosopher, he was an academic, and he created the Gorsedd. So the Gorsedd is the representation of the Druids. So it was him who thought the Eisteddfod needs some color, it needs some life. Let's make the Druids. So if you are a very important person in Wales, oh, Catrin, we could be in this Gorsedd, couldn't we? Because if you have a degree...
We could be blue because we have a degree in Welsh.
That's it. Si tenés un título de la universidad en Gales, puedes ser miembro. Pero bueno. So in Wales, if you're an important poet or musician or academic or personality, you can be a Druid. And in Patagonia, we have a Gorsedd. We have a Gorsedd o Wladfa. And it's a little bit different. We have ponchos instead of robes. And we meet in Gaiman in the dust and the heat. But the idea is to mark the people who work for the Welsh culture, which is the same in Wales and Patagonia. And I had to put the picture of the horses, los caballos que dirigen la procesión de las bardas. Me encanta. Okay, and finally, sports, chwaraeon, deportes. Wales is a very small country, and yet we have produced some big athletes. Obviously, this man at the top, you're all going to shout out, it's Gareth Bale. Exactly, I heard you, Gareth Bale. He is our top footballer at the moment, but maybe more impressive for me is this guy here who won the Tour de France, the bike race around France. He's Geraint Thomas, and he's a Welsh speaker from the south. And here is Jade Jones, who won a gold medal at the Rio Olympics for Taekwondo. I know Taekwondo is important here in Argentina. And in the past, people like Colin Jackson, Ian Woosnam, the golfer. And we have the Welsh rugby team, which has won the Five Nations, lost against Argentina the last time they were here, didn't they? Okay. And we have the most fantastic stadium in Caerdydd, in Cardiff, which is the Millennium Stadium, where some of the World Cup football matches were played, and international football matches and so on. So we are a very small but rich nation. We have a language which is our own. We have music which is our own. We have a culture which we can share by learning the language, and we are very proud of what we have, which is what we wanted to share with you, and hopefully it will make you think of Wales maybe in a different way, because we have the idea of the stovetop hat and the stern face, and Wales is much more diverse than that these days. Catrin?
We have one of the great things that we as Welsh people love to talk about are famous people. But first, I wanted to show you our 3 Welsh schools here in Patagonia. We have Ysgol yr Hendre, which was established in 2006, I think, in Trelew. We have Ysgol Gymraeg y Gaiman, which started as a nursery school too in 1993, but I'm not sure when they started as a Welsh school, 2012, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Ysgol y Cwm, which Clare is one of the governors in Trefellyn. As you can see, they plan for the future, and you can see the children as young as 3 years old taking part in the Eisteddfodau, in the Eisteddfods, which is very important to us, not so much from a competition point of view, but as a way of learning poetry by heart. Es muy importante que empiezan a participar en los Eisteddfods, no para competir, sino para aprender música, canciones de memoria, poesía de memoria y bailar en equipo, que toda la idea de participar y en los Eisteddfods es central a las escuelas. Here we have, me divertí juntando los famosos de Gales. But first, we have Lyned and Tegay Roberts from Gaiman. Tegay died in 2014, but Lyned is still with us, still a very strong personality. And maybe some of you know that in 1970, a very famous, very young artist came here called Catrin Williams. He won a scholarship and he spent some months here. He died recently, but his pictures are so fantastic and so expensive, ¿no es cierto, Claire? ¿Tenés uno?
No.
Yo tampoco. Me encantaría, pero no tengo los 15,000, 25,000 libras para comprar uno. And maybe you heard of Bruce Chatwin, who wrote his famous travel book in Patagonia, en la Patagonia. He met, we believe, Linnet and Tegay. Tegay does not say good things about him. She didn't say good things about him. But Patagonia became famous, or became more well-known because of his writing. We have our sportsmen and women. Tammy Gray-Thompson, Claire, she's won
Yes.
12 gold medals in the Paralympics. 12. One of the most decorated sports women or men ever. Oh, and you see this picture here of the Welsh rugby team, the present Welsh rugby team. It's in Hensel. I used to play there when I was a child. It's donde iba a jugar. I have a photo of my brother and I playing there. It's near where I grew up. And then some famous Welsh actors. Do you recognize them?
Yes.
Yeah, well, Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce are famous now, but Richard Burton is possibly one of the most famous ever. And he spoke Welsh. He spoke Welsh. His parents and his brothers and sisters spoke Welsh. And Richard Burton and Anthony Hopkins come from the same village.
Oh.
And maybe currently these days, maybe you know one of these. I'm a big fan of Matthew Rhys, who's been here many times.
Oh.
Yeah. He actually hizo el camino de los rifleros, del Valle a Trevelyan. Yeah, he's in The Americans, in Perry Mason, and Michael Sheen. He's a very famous. We're going to listen to Michael Sheen now. Catherine Zeta-Jones, everybody knows her. And Rhys Ifans is a very famous actor, but possibly more well known in Britain and in the theatre. Well, we've already seen Tom Jones. Do you know Shirley Bassey?
I forgot Shirley Bassey. How did I forget?
No, because she's not as well known.
No.
Outside of Wales. And we have Catherine Jenkins and do you remember Cerys Matthews?
I thought about her too, yeah.
She has a radio program every week.
Folk or country music, isn't it?
I think, yes, I think it's a mix. And then we have the Stereophonics and the Manic Street Preachers. Tom Jones sang with the concert you talked about was Tom Jones with the Stereophonics, wasn't it? They've got a #1 hit at the moment. And our famous Welsh musicians, Carl Jenkins is a famous composer and compositor, and Geraint Evans was a Welsh singer. And as Claire talked about Welsh literature, here is Gwyneth Lewis, who wrote the words that are on Millennium Centre. Do you remember, have you read Roald Dahl, Las Brujas, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, El Big Friendly Giant? He invented all of these, Matilda, and Disney have just bought all of his books, all of them. And the most famous of all, possibly Dylan Thomas. Bob Dylan took his name from Dylan Thomas.
And it's interesting that Dylan Thomas wrote in English, but he still had the Welsh poetry. Aunque escribió en inglés, Dylan Thomas, tenía la poesía que te sonaba en el oído, ¿no? Era muy influenciado, muy galés.
Siempre decimos que suena galés, aunque escribe en inglés. Y una cosa que quería compartir is the sound of English with so much Welsh influence. We have a recording made a week ago with Michael Sheen. And do you know who wrote the words, Claire?
No.
Well, a teacher who came here, her name is Sarah Lewis.
Ah.
She wrote the words, she wrote the script. It's about rugby, but it's about being Welsh. So I want to share this with you. And hopefully we can finish here, and you can appreciate a little of what we believe to be our Welsh identity, and it's very bilingual. We speak Welsh, but English is very important to us too.
We know all about magic here in this little big town of ours, where this patch of green earth is our very own universe. Stand in this place long enough and you'll feel it too. The ground beneath your feet, abuzz with the echoes of 1,000 scrums. The murmured whispers of crowds standing in a choir, singing their aria of tactics and sorrow and joy. Ours is a story 145 years in the making, driven by a sense of perthyn, belonging. It is a story of resilience and passion, of family and tribe, of fortitude. Our roots run deep, from Mynydd Dinas to Swansea Bay and beyond, under the gaze of an iron dragon who never sleeps. Heroes have been made here, in this cauldron of hope and possibility, where Bevan and Shell, Mainwaring, James and O'Connor were torch-bearers, illuminating the path ahead. On the pitch and on the battlefields of 2 world wars, and throughout each chapter of our history, we have been bound by the unbreakable bond of community, woven into all we do. So, when the world suddenly stopped for a while, we did not. We answered the battle cry once more to play a very different game, a cavalry charge to cradle a community, offering comfort where we could, doorstop deliveries and gestures of love through windows about. And when Christmas came, we shone a light through the darkness as a reminder of better days ahead. We are the Wizards of Aberavon, where a try is so much more than 5 points. It also means the effort to accomplish something. So come, the Croeso here is quite something. Come and be part of the magic too.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Maybe somebody has some questions. ¿Tienen preguntas?
Catrin, what about the Princess Diana? For you.
Catrin?
Do you want to answer?
Okay. It goes back to the history that the Prince of Wales, since 1282, is not really our prince. He's not really the Prince of Wales. He's the eldest son of the Queen. Desde esa fecha, no, el príncipe de Gales no es el príncipe de Gales, es el primogénito del rey o la reina. And so his wife is the Princess of Wales. But we thought Diana was a good role model, a good person. Not Welsh, but a good role model. Catrin, I don't know.
No, really well answered, Claire, really well answered. For me, she was nothing to do with Wales,
No.
but she was interesting, and I felt very sad when she died.
And she came to Patagonia. She came
Yeah,
and
she-
had tea in Gaiman,
Yeah,
whale watching in Madrid.
yeah.
Mm.
There is another part of the world, cities like or village like Gaiman with the culture of Wales.
That's a
Or
very
only-
interesting question.
Only food. Or
Eh,
only
eh,
food.
The Welsh moved to many places in the world. They went to Brazil, they went to the United States, they went to Australia. I have family in the United States and in Australia. But what happened was, by the second generation, they didn't speak Welsh. They lost the language. So in the middle of the 19th century, about 1850, 1860, there was a movement to emigrate to somewhere where there was no influence of the English language. So that's why they chose somewhere like Chubut, where there was no English, there was nobody. And it's one of the reasons why the Welsh language has survived here, because there's so little influence from other places.
Okay.
Interesting. Well,
If you go to the United States, people are very proud of their Welsh roots. If I, in the United States, said, I lived there for a year, if I said I was from Wales, they knew where I was from and they respected it. If I go to Europe, even if I go to parts of England, they say, where? But in the United States, in Argentina, everywhere in Argentina, they respect the fact that we're from Wales. Even in Australia, there are parts of Australia named after Wales. You have New South Wales and other places. And the family that I have are very proud of their Welsh roots, but they do not speak Welsh. They have Eisteddfods, but they don't speak Welsh.
Yes, I have a cousin in Melbourne, in Australia, who teaches Welsh in the local Welsh chapel. But the language is
Wow.
very much dormant. It's asleep. It needs a.
Well, language is identity anyway. It's your own identity. So that's
Exactly.
very important. Language says who you are. That's what.
Yes.
Well, any other questions? Girls? I can see girls, please.
No.
Other questions? Well, so thank you very much. Thank you, Catrin. Thank you, Claire. You know, your presentation has been amazing, believe me.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
it has been very, very clear. So I have to say thank you, because then I have to change the session. So I have to say goodbye. And Claire, we will see you after in the next session. Is that possible? I think we have to talk for a couple of minutes.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So let's okay. Well, so thank you very
Thank you.
much, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ta-ta.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.